Hi everyone, and welcome to the second devlog on my indie game, a Shmup that I'm developing using Swift, SpriteKit and GameplayKit. As you can see, I'm still using the same amazing placeholder graphics as last time, but quite a few under hood things have actually happened since the previous devlog. So some things that are worth mentioning are that I now have spawning points that gets triggered when the camera passes over them. I've added some initial path-based enemy movements, implemented a bit more advanced layer handling with layers and sub-layers for the different entities. The camera now can move over the world, so I actually have a scrolling background, which is kind of woohoo. And I also decided on what kind of coordinate system to use. Where to put anchor points and so on, which will make it easier for me to deal with different devices and their aspect ratios when that day comes, which is most certainly will. So anyway, let's take a closer look on some of these implementations. Here I have enabled markers to visualize the spawning points. As soon as a point hits the bottom of the screen, it will trigger the spawn of its associated entity. So as the camera keeps moving over the game world, it will keep triggering spawning points as it passes by them. So if you go back here a little bit in time, we can look at the first spawning point down here. And as soon as it reaches the bottom of the screen, we can look up here. And here we can see at that time the first entity coming in. And then the second marker hits the bottom of the screen, and the second entity comes in up here. So I have a few test spawning points here that keep spawning enemies as the camera moves. And the last two spawning points are put on the same frame to ensure that we can trigger multiple enemies at the same time. So we'll have two enemies coming in from the side here at that exact same time. So, while we're at it, let's also take a quick look at the enemy movements. Right now they are following predefined paths, using quad curves that are attached via components. I have one path here that looks somewhat like this curve, that the entities will keep following as they are spawned. And if you look over here, I have a second path that goes across the screen from left to right, which the two last enemies will follow. Using predefined paths I guess will work fine for quite a few cases, but there are a few enemy types that probably will need some other kind of movement for as well. Like maybe the seeking behavior, where the enemy tries to catch the player, comes to mind. I'm using the entity component design pattern with the entity component classes from Apple's GameplayKit framework to set this up. So the movement here we see is a component used by the enemy entity. Going forward, I'll probably just add a few more options for this component, or what kind of movement behavior to use when the entity with the component is spawned. And also, right now, I have a simple data structure in the code where I define the spawn points with the associate enemy and which path for the enemy to follow. Moving forward, I will most certainly replace that with some sort of level editor instead. An editor where I easily can design the levels and the enemies and scrub back and forth over the world to fine-tune all the different actions happening while progressing through the level and so on. Okay, I guess that should wrap it up for this second entry on my devlog. Next I will work on implementing some solid collision detection on top of SpriteKit's collision system. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. And I have a blog at code.bitbibop.com. Feel free to check it out. And you can also follow me on Twitter, where I'm at Artstorm. Over and out.